So if you know anything about me, I'm primarily a video shooter. As much as I love the mirrorless cameras and the DSLRs for their photo capabilities, I don't really use them for photos. I use them to take high quality videos for my clients and for my social media as well. And with every single new camera I get, the video settings are always slightly different and they're making more advancements, so there's more options available to me. In this video, I want to share with you my settings for the highest quality video that you can record on the R6. Let's get started. So first things first, you're gonna make sure your mode dial is actually on to video. And then when we go to the menu setting, you want to make sure this is on manual, just so you can control all the settings and actually control exposure. Now, very simply, you want your movie record quality just to be the frame you're going to shoot in. There's IPB and IPB Lite. Lite is a smaller file, but it's slightly less quality. I like to use it just because I like having space. And in this case, I will shoot 24 frames, but you have 30 and 60 in 4K. And then you also have the same exact options, but in full HD. Next, movie cropping. This is only if you really want to crop into your image. I don't like to, so I leave this off. And then sound recording is actually something else, so we'll just skip. So page 2. ISO speed settings, you can just leave that as it is. HDR PQ, I would sometimes turn on, but I prefer C-Log, so we'll get to that shortly. And the rest of these options I actually leave off, and sometimes I will actually turn on 1/8 stop increments. Alright, and now onto page 3. We have white balance, we don't have to worry about, but we're going to actually focus on picture style. I like portrait just because you can add a little bit of sharpening. It's already set at 3, which is pretty good for my use, but feel free to experiment. And if you actually want the most raw data, you can actually just kind of bring down contrast and sharpness, so you can do it in post instead. And now this is the most important menu if you're trying to actually record high quality cinematic footage. It's actually Canon log. So the great thing about the R6 is that you actually have access to C-Log 3, which is slightly better than C-Log 1, but not as good as C-Log 2. So now we're going to actually turn on C-Log 3. I like having the view assist on just because it's hard to stare at a flat profile and like judge exposure and focus. So I leave that. And then for characteristics, this is actually personal preference. I used to have this all the way down, the sharpness to 0, so I can sharpen in post, but I find that it just drags on my editing software, so I leave this actually around 3, and everything else I leave the same. Last but not least, we have the color space. And BT709 is good. BT2020 is slightly better. You get a little more color dynamic range. And then the Cinema Gamma gives the best colors in my opinion, so I put it in Cinema. And there you go, that's pretty much it for this menu. For this menu, this is actually personal preference. So for lens aberration correction, you can leave these things on or off. I like having the distortion correction on so that it actually fixes the image on the camera itself. But otherwise, you can kind of leave these off. If you really want, you can turn these on. I feel like I don't like letting the lens and camera make too many decisions for me, so I leave these off, but this is just personal preference. And then for high ISO speed noise reduction, I like to not mess with this just because, once again, I don't want the camera to do any of the smoothing out. Plus, once you bake in the smoothing onto the footage, the smoothing of the noise, you can't undo that, so I just rather do it, myself, if I do it at all, which I never really do. We can basically skip the next few pages, HDR, timer mode, and now we're on to image stabilization. I personally like using the in-body, so I leave this one on IS mode. This allows the in-body stabilization to be used, and I do not mess with digital. This crops into the image, and although it may be useful, I just find I don't want to ever crop into the image and lose quality when I don't have to. Shutter function, I actually do like making the half press servo AF, and then I actually turn off full press because I used to have it on start stop, but for whatever reason I felt like it was very sensitive and I would accidentally record all the time and then just sometimes not be recording when I thought I was, so I like to turn that off. Metering you can leave where it is. Zebras you can't do with C-Log, and then shooting info doesn't matter, and then the viewfinder doesn't matter. Last but not least, you have standby resolution. It's also called heat control back in the past. Basically, this helps prevent overheating a little bit. I like to leave this on. And then for HDMI display, I actually like putting camera and the HDMI on. And now you're all set. And there you have it. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hopefully this is helpful for you. And if you have the R6 Mark II, I'm pretty sure most of these settings are in there as well. So this should be transferable up to that model as well. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them down below. I'd be happy to answer them. If you liked the video, please hit that like button. It helps me out a ton. and subscribe for more video tutorials just like this. Until next time, ciao.